All righty. We're going to open this study with the set-aside prayer, or at least one version of the set-aside prayer. God, please set aside everything that I think I know about myself, my unmanageability, my spiritual path, and you, for an open mind and a new experience of myself, my unmanageability, my spiritual path, and especially you. Thanks for taking the steps with us. My name is David. I'm a recovered alcoholic and drug addict, and with me is
I am also David, and I am a recovered alcoholic and a drug addict. Welcome, guys.
This is not a fellowship group or meeting. Instead, over 12 weeks, we're taking the 12 steps of recovery together, following the precise, specific, clear-cut directions in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because this is not a fellowship group, anyone interested in the program recovery in the Big Book is welcome to take the steps with us. The goal is to take the steps and learn how to take someone else quickly through the steps. Some other information and ground rules. We are recording the audio. We'll share it in the WhatsApp group and via a podcast. If you are not in the WhatsApp group, you can put your name and number, including the country code in the chat, but it's even easier if you just follow the link. Emily will put the link in there. Just let Emily know if you're having trouble joining. Please commit to being here every week because we're taking all 12 steps. So be here every week. And if you can, it's ideal if you can stay on camera so we can all have eye contact and do this together. There's no attendee comment portion during the study, but we will field questions if you're getting lost in anything that we're talking about. Please put those questions in the Zoom chat, and we will look out for them and try to answer them as we go, or at the end of the meeting, or worst case, in that WhatsApp group after we're done. And if you need some extra help, if you're just missing something, David or I or Emily or, some of our other recovered peers will make some time for you this week to make sure that you understand the content that we're covering. We're not the official Big Book experts or gurus. We're just sharing our experience and our knowledge from our study of the book and the teachings of other people. Our dictionary person is Emily, and she will put the definitions into the chat as we go and then summarize them. And again, we'll share those in the WhatsApp group and in the chat here. Any of the resources we refer to or show in this study, you can also find at www.purposeofthisbook.com. Emily will put that in the chat too. It's not a commercial website, guys. It's just a recovery website with listings about stuff that comes up in this and some other studies. Okay, so now let's get into, with all that being said, let's get into what we're talking about today. So today we're talking about step 2. If you were here with us last week, you took step 1 with us. And if you're saying to yourself, well, wait a minute, I thought step 1 was huge and involved and I should have to do all these things, put aside all those old ideas you have. And we're going to, as we start step 2, we're going to help you understand, and we're going to find out if you took step 1 last week or not. And if you didn't, that's okay. Reach out. We'll go back through the content with you so that you did take step 1. But we are moving on into step 2 today. And what is step 2? It is came to believe. Believe is a really important word we're going to be talking about this entire time today. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Okay, and as we're going to be studying out of one chapter today, and that is the chapter We Agnostics, which is chapter 4, which begins on page 44. Okay, so everybody get to page 44, and we're going to dive in. So, as I said, if you were with us last week, I believe you all took step 1. Here's how we're going to find this out. Starting from the top of the chapter. In the preceding chapters, you've learned something of alcoholism. We hope we have made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. If, when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if, when drinking, you have little control over the amount you take, you are probably alcoholic. If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. Go ahead, David.
That is a great paragraph, as a qualifying paragraph. If I want to make my approach at a meeting with someone and I take them aside, I could go right to this paragraph and I could take the middle part of that paragraph and ask this in question form instead of statement form, as the book is saying here. So here it is in the middle of the paragraph, and I'm just going to use my name here. David, when you honestly want to, do you find you cannot quit entirely? So that is the obsession of the mind. So that means without my permission, without my consent, do I still pick up even though there's going to be consequences, or if I can't even think of the consequences, the obsession of the mind kicks in and I pick up a drink. And then it says or, which is a bit of a drunk trap, guys. You got to pay attention to that because it's really not or, but the Bill's liberal writing here says or. But let's continue on. If when you're drinking, you have little control of the amount you take, so that is of the body. That means once I put it in my body, this abnormal reaction happens in me. This means I break out in this phenomenon of craving. And then it asked me, I lost my place. Amount you take, you're probably alcoholic. So if I have both, if I have body and mind, then the book is telling me that I am probably alcoholic, which is probably liberal. So those are the questions. So once I put it in my body, do I break out in craving? And once I stop, can I stay stopped? And if I answer no to each one of those questions, I'm probably alcoholic. And then it tells me, and this is the solution that we have to offer. The only solution we have to offer in Alcoholics Anonymous or Cocaine Anonymous or DA, whatever the A you're going to. If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness, which only, and please circle the word only. This is what we offer right here, the spiritual experience. And that's what conquers this thing. That's it.
So I said, I believe everyone who's here last week took step one with us. Why am I saying that? And why is this paragraph supporting that assertion? Because of those qualification questions that David just asked. Do I understand the powerlessness that I have physically as an alcoholic or an addict, that when I put the substance into my body, when I put alcohol in my body, I have an allergic reaction, I break out in craving, I start drinking and I can't stop drinking? Do I understand that? Do I experience that? So I understand that, and yes, I experience that. What about the mental powerlessness that after I'm done because I blacked out or got thrown out, I passed out, got kicked out, whatever it is, do I start drinking again, even though I know it's going to be bad for me? If so, then yes, that's the mental powerlessness. And personally, I experienced that too. And then there was the other thing that we talked about after the dash in the first step, that my life is unmanageable, otherwise known as a spiritual malady. Well, this little summary paragraph here at the beginning of this chapter is saying, David, if you got the physical allergy and you got the mental obsession, it's sort of ipso facto. We already guessed that you got the spiritual malady, and therefore you're going to need a spiritual solution. So if you were here with us last week and maybe it was the first time you ever formally took step one, if you understand that you're the physical powerlessness and you understand the mental obsession and you understand the spiritual malady, the unmanageability, and you say, yeah, I get it, and that's me, congratulations. You took step one. That's really it, guys. You don't have to go and journal. You don't have to go into a cave and meditate for 40 days and 40 nights. Step one, just like step two, is about comprehension, right? Which means I understand the step. And it's about, is this me? Do I get it? Do I understand and agree? And therefore I can move on in the next step. Okay.
Let me come just from a different angle, just real briefly here, though. So, just so you have a great understanding. So, if I take alcohol in my body, if I take a drink, ask yourself this question, and this is something to consider. So, when I put it in my body, can I control the amount I drink? Ask yourself that question, because if you can control the amount you drink, then just drink the way you want to drink. Okay. And then when it comes to the mind, to think about this, can you stay stopped on your own power? Because if you can stay stopped on your own power, don't drink at all. But if you're a real alcoholic like me, then once I stop, I have this spiritual malady inside of me that drives me back to the drink. The obsession kicks in, which is a thought. A thought is an obsession, but when it becomes an obsession and it overwrites all my good thinking, I pick up a drink and then I break out in craving. So if I can control the amount I drink, just drink the way I want to drink. And if I can stay stopped, then just stay stopped. But if I can't do any one of those things here, we have a great solution for that. And that is a spiritual experience.
So if you're like me and David, we're powerless physically and mentally, right? We qualify just like that. So if I'm powerless, let's talk more about that powerlessness. We're going to jump to page 45. So it's the next page over in the first full paragraph. Right? Lack of power, powerlessness, lack of power. That was our dilemma. we had to find a power by which we could live. And it had to be a power greater than ourselves. I'm just going to pause there for a sec. Those italics, guys, and anytime you see italic writing, it's extra emphasis. So really pay attention, okay? So let me just start it over again. It's a short paragraph. Lack of power, that was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously. But where and how were we to find this power? And I'm just going to give a spoiler alert. We're actually going to tell you exactly where to find that power, but we're not going to get to that until towards the end of the study. You have to stick with us to get the answer to that. Go ahead, David.
All right, so yeah, and Bill sets us up like that throughout the whole big book. And if you don't know who Bill is, Bill Wilson, I'm speaking of, is the guy who wrote this book. He started in 1937 and was published in 1939. So lack of power. So this only applies if I'm powerless, right? And I accepted the qualifications on page 44 that once I put a drink in my body, that I can't control the amount of drink, and once I stop, I cannot stay stopped. So then I come to the realization that lack of power is my dilemma. And Emily posted the definitions in the chat, and I randomly pick out some definitions for us to look at out of a 1938 dictionary. As I just stated, Bill wrote this in 1937, started it. Definitions have changed, guys. So Bill, as we go through these definitions here today, we're going to realize how purposeful these words are. So the definition of dilemma, according to Bill in 1937, dilemma means a choice or a situation in which a person has to choose between courses of action. Okay, so if I'm lack of power is my dilemma, we had to is a must. In the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, we're going to find about 139 have to, has to, or musts. Find a power by which we can circle the word live if you'd like. Live, because that's not what I was doing prior to Alcoholics Anonymous. That was not living. I was just existing. And the living means that I get to live two lives in one. We had to be a power in italic writing. So if you ever listen to Joe and Charlie, they say when you read an italic writing, pay attention. It's like a neon sign. This is very, very important. Power greater than ourselves. That is a reference to action. This program is about action. It's not just a belief necessarily, but at this point, it is a belief. We are going to have to get into some kind of action, because then it says obviously, and where and how are we going to find this power? And like David just set us up, Bill comes with problem, gives a solution, and then he gives us practical program of action.
Yeah, to get from the problem to the solution. So lack of power, my powerlessness, that's my dilemma. That's my problem. That's why I'm stuck. We had to find a power, because I don't have a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves. Guys, last week when we took step one, or the majority of the time was understanding that physical powerlessness, that mental powerlessness, that unmanageability, the spiritual malady. But what we did late in the study is what David and I always do, is we show the hope in the solution. We give a sneak preview at 12, step 12, right? We went to page 27, where you don't have to go there, you don't get lost. I'm just going to refer back to it. It was Dr. Jung talking to Roland Hazard about what it looks like to have a vital spiritual experience, and said another way, a life-saving, greater than human event, right? So that's why here Bill is saying a power greater than ourselves. We're coming back to this core idea that I need to tap something bigger than me, bigger than David, bigger than Emily, bigger than Paul or Haley or anybody here, or even bigger than all of us collectively, right? The 50, 60, whatever there is of us here today, we have a lot of power together, but it's not enough power. You guys collectively do not have the power to get and keep me sober and then recovered. I need something bigger than me and bigger than you. Right? If you tied me up and you didn't let me drink and I never got recovered, one day when I broke out of my ropes, I'm going to go drink, guys. Right? This is how we are if we're real alcoholics. And then it says, obviously. Is it obvious? Why should it be obvious? Here's why it should be obvious. Because if I really understood step one, and I really identified with step one, understanding that I am powerless, I am without power, then I've got to find that power greater myself, because I don't have any other options, right? If I can't get me sober and recovered, and you guys can't get me sober and recovered, it better become obvious in a hurry that something bigger than human is what's got to save my tail. And again, I gave the little sneak preview, and David did too. We're gonna expose to you exactly where and how we find this power. And keep this in mind too. I should have set this up at the beginning when I read step 2, right? Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. The sanity we're talking about here, guys, is not, did I do a bunch of crazy stuff when I was out drinking and drugging? Which, by the way, yes, I did. And I know enough of you and your stories that you did crazy things too. The sanity we're talking about here, guys, is my thinking about picking up a drink. When my thinking is insane and it occurs to me to pick up a drink, I pick it up because I think tonight's going to be different. I'll be able to control and enjoy myself. The restoration to sanity that I get from my vital spiritual experience is that if it occurs to me to have a drink, I'll be like, I don't drink. That'd be bad for me. Moving on. This is about sane thinking as it relates to alcohol. Okay. So let's go to page 46. First full paragraph. Well, guys, 4 paragraphs in a row here. This is the crux of step 2, these next 4 paragraphs, and they are designed to make it very clear how easy, and sometimes we don't like the word easy in 12-step recovery because we feel like it devalues something. But Bill takes great pains here to show you how easy it is to start to come to believe in a power greater than myself, that we don't have to get stuck on the God idea. Okay, so here's the first paragraph. Yes, we of agnostic temperament have had these thoughts and experiences. And it's referring to the paragraph before that we skipped, where basically it's ideas like, oh, I don't think there's a God because bad things happen to good people and there's wars and sickness and famine. It's sort of that sort of thinking, right? So we're saying, yes, we of agnostic temperament have had these thoughts and experiences. Let us make haste to reassure you. We found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice and express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we commenced to get results, even though it was impossible for any of us to fully define or comprehend that power, which is God. So, guys, let me tell you what this means. Understand what Bill is saying here is we've all come from the same place. We're all skeptical. In agnostic, we have these terms like agnostic and atheist. An atheist is someone, I'm going to say it this way, refuses to believe in a higher power, right? Just like rejects it. The agnostic comes from the Latin ag, right? Without, and gnosis, knowledge, without knowledge. And it's sort of without a decision made is, I think, the easiest way to think about it, about something bigger than us, right? A spiritual being. So he's saying, listen, we've all had these ideas where we've rejected the ideas of spirituality and faith, and saying, we're going to make haste, we're going to quickly make you feel better. That if you're able to just lay aside some prejudice, which are old ideas, and express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we start to get results, even though we don't even know, we don't have any firm ideas about what God is. Think about this sentence, guys. This is the most important sentence in this paragraph. Express a willingness to believe. This doesn't say, in order to start to get results, I must believe. What it says is I have to be willing to believe. Well, I can say, guys, I'm willing to believe, but it may take 100 years for the willingness to turn into belief. And Bill's saying, that's okay. Right? Theoretically, this is open-ended with no timeline. Now, David and I will tell you there is a timeline. Get your butt in gear. Let's get to God. Let's get a new relationship. But what's great pains in this chapter to say, guys, if I can just let go of my old thinking and have a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of an open mind, I'm immediately going to start to get recovered. Not just physically sober, but recovered.
So setting up this paragraph prior to this now, we're on page 46. Bill's not going to talk about alcohol at all the rest of the pages up to page 164. He's going to be talking about seeking power. That's what he's going to talk about here. That is really, really important to find out, because alcohol is not my problem. David and I only speak for David and I at this point, that we haven't had a drink or a drug in a very, very long time. So it can't be the problem. The problem is that, and Bill talks about here what I have to do. He's going to give us clear-cut, specific, precise directions in this paragraph here. And it's also going to be laid in a promise. So it says we have agnostic temperament. If I continue to have an agnostic temper, old thinking, it will affect me permanently, my behaviors permanently. So what David pointed out is I gotta let go of my old ideas. And as I stayed sober for a few 24 hours, like that also means my old ideas. As I go through these steps and if I have a spiritual experience, I will find out that all my old ideas on how to be married, all my old ideas about how to go to meeting, all my old ideas on what kind of an employee I am, like all those things, I could be better at it. Who knew? Why? Because we're tapping into power. We are tapping into infinite power here because it talks about it. We as the first 100 members of Alcoholics Anonymous found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice here, preconceived thoughts or opinions about something in the past or even in the current moment, and even here's is the caveat here, and express even a willingness to believe in a power greater ourselves. That's all we're asking here, is for a willingness to believe that there's a power. Because I met Emily, she's a wonderful person. She talks about having a relationship with God. Maybe I can believe that she believes. Maybe that's just enough. And I bet you $100 that Emily tell me, my God's big enough for both of us. You want to borrow some of my God for a minute? Please do, until you can develop a relationship with one of your own. And then it says, willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves. We commence to get results. If I can lay aside with these clear-cut and specific directions that Bill's given us here, and also open up my mind to willingness to believe, then I can commence to get results. What are these results? Then I'm going to the problems will be removed. What are the problems in my life? My unmanageability and my obsession gone. Who's going to take them? Not a human being. No human being can do that, right? You guys all have kids, or you don't, or some kind of family member that you try to rely upon to keep sober. Couldn't do it on those people. But a power greater than myself, a relationship with them, I can. And then it says there, even though it was impossible for us to fully define or comprehend the word God, why can't I? I can't. It's infinite power. I have finite power. So I can't, if I just did a talk on Zoom like a week ago about this, and I can't describe, and the title was power greater in your, or a relationship with a power greater in yourself. It's just like, I can't comprehend, I can't define to you what that looks like. I can just say it is infinite power, a God of my no understanding.
So as you're taking somebody through the steps, which is what we're going to do right now, if you're on step 2, and I don't care if you're a newcomer like Haley, right? If you're here for step 1 and you understand step 1, you're in a position to take somebody else through step 1. So now you can take somebody through step 2 as we come out of this. The key concept from this paragraph is you don't have to believe right now. Are you willing to believe one day? That is the most disarming argument, right? Okay, yeah, maybe later I'll believe. Okay, then let's keep going. That's a sufficient response. So next paragraph. Much to our relief, we discovered we did not need to consider another's conception of God. Our own conception, however inadequate, was sufficient to make the approach and to effect a contact with him. Pay attention again here.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as we admitted the possible existence of a creative intelligence, a spirit of the universe underlying the totality of things, we began to be possessed of a new sense of power and direction, provided we took other simple steps. We found that God does not make too hard terms with those who seek him. To us, the realm of spirit is broad, roomy, all-inclusive, never exclusive or forbidding to those who earnestly seek. It is open, we believe, to all men. So guys, just like the last paragraph, Bill is serving. So if you're, it's this, we have this concept, at least here in the United States, of like somebody tosses you a beach ball, because it's a baseball analogy, right? So somebody whips a fastball at you and the ball's only like this big. It's very hard to hit. But if you got a bat and someone tosses a big beach ball at you, it's easy to hit. Bill is tossing us another beach ball here.
Mm-hmm.
Right? What he's saying is, right in the middle, coming in the third sentence, as soon as we admitted the possible existence of, I'm just going to say God, one syllable, 3 letters, easy. I'm not talking about the God of the Bible, unless it is for you, whatever. We're not talking religion. But this is Bill's key point. It doesn't say, as soon as we admitted the existence, of God, we began to be possessed. It says the possible existence. So again, if you're working with a newcomer and they're trying to get stuck on God, they're looking for an excuse not to get healthy, not to help save their own lives. You're like, dude, fine. You don't have to admit that God exists. You, is it possible? And well, maybe I guess. And David brought this up too. Borrowing someone's God. If someone's hemming and hawing, I'll say, hey man, do you believe that I believe in a higher power? And they always say, yeah, man, I believe you believe. I said, okay, good
Mm,
enough. Because if you believe that I believe, you're admitting the possible existence of
mm.
something. Bill is trying to make it easy. Just crack the door a little. The idea of step two is not to fling the door wide open and to shove somebody through it to God. No, no. It's to crack the door open just a little bit and then to let the newcomer taking the steps widen it on their own as they widen their relationship with God. And what happens as I admit the possible existence of a creative intelligence, a spirit of the universe underlying the totality of things, what happens is I begin to be possessed of a new sense of power and direction. So in both of these paragraphs, Bill's saying, if you just maybe, if you just say maybe, you're going to start to get results. I'm going to start to get results. And then I'm going to be possessed with a new sense of power and direction, all for saying maybe.
Yes. So Bill's in this paragraph and he's talking about so much to our relief, we discovered we did not need to consider another's conception of God. To David's point, you know what we don't have here in Alcoholics Anonymous? I'm just using Alcoholics Anonymous. If it's CADA, whatever yours A is, we don't have a God. We just don't have a religious God. And religion is a set of practices, right? For the most part, which is fine and dandy. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not putting that down. I go to church. It's fine. But spirituality is a set of disciplines. And that's what I need the most is disciplines in my life today. So comprehend the word God, which is God. Much of our beliefs we discovered we did not need to consider another person's conception of God. Our own conception, however, inadequate. So I always say to my guys, new person, I make my approach. I said, are you willing to get on your knees and pray to God? He goes, well, I don't know if I really necessarily believe. I said, I didn't ask you that. I asked you if you're willing to get on your knees and pray to God. And the reason why I get on my knees and pray to God is not because my God is an egomaniac that he needs me on my knees, is to remind me, humbly remind me that I don't have the power to manage my own life, that I need to tap into that power. And that's why I get on my knees and I practice that principle all the time. And then it says, in our own conception, however inadequate, was sufficient to make the approach and to affect the contact with him. So to produce this effect, I need to have that willingness and that belief. And then it says, as soon as we admitted, when is as soon as? That's like right now. This happens for me right now. I don't have to wait. This happens for me right now. As soon as I do this, okay, wait for it here. We admitted the possible existence, and Bill's going to throw a bunch of euphemisms of descriptions of God here. Creative intelligence, spirit of the universe. As we know, anytime we see capital letters in a sentence here, we know that he's talking about a God of his no understanding, the underlying totality of things. We begin to be possessed of a new sense of power and direction. That is a reference to step 3 when we're talking about we begin to be possessed of a new sense of power and direction. Here's the caveat, provided we took some simple steps. What does that mean? The rest of the work here, boys and girls, that's what that means. And then we found that God does not make too hard of terms with those who seek him. This is always about the seeking. This is continually about the seeking, still for me to this day. And then to us, the realm of the spirit is broad and roomy and inclusive. So never exclusive or forbidding for those who are earnestly seek him. It is open, we believe, to all men. So that the one definition there that I didn't give to Emily here, but I like is creative. And the definition of creative is a function of the will, a decision to take actions. Is anyone, something to consider, anyone ever want to do better, but you don't do better? So this is about power for my will so that I do better. This is about tapping into that power so that I do better. I want to do better, but on my own power, can I do better? And my experience is that as I stayed sober for a few 24 hours, when I tap into that power, I seem to do better.
So the theme here, these first two paragraphs, and you're going to see it in the next two paragraphs, and I'm going to repeat myself again because it's so important. If you're taking any notes here, the theme of these 4 paragraphs is if I can say maybe I'm on the road to recovery. Okay. And you're going to see that again in these next few paragraphs. And also, let me say this, guys. The spiritual experience, the spiritual awakening, the vital spiritual awakening, it's not a waterfall that occurs when I formally take the 12th step for the first time. The spiritual awakening starts right here in step 2. Okay. The work of taking step 1, where I admit I'm powerless and my life's unmanageable, I know the score, which is all zeros on my side of the stat sheet. I'm powerless, I'm hopeless. Now I can start to get better. I start to get better in 2. Like I said, I crack the door, and that door gets wider and wider and wider as I take the rest of the steps. So if I can say maybe, I start to get better. Top of 47. When therefore we speak to you of God, we mean your own conception of God. This applies to other spiritual expressions which you find in this book. Do not let any prejudice you may have against spiritual terms deter you from honestly asking yourself what they mean to you. At the start, this is all we needed to commence spiritual growth. Again, at the start, this is all we needed to commence spiritual growth, to affect our first conscious relation with God as we understood Him. Afterward, we found ourselves accepting many things which then seemed entirely out of reach. That was growth. But if we wished to grow, we had to begin somewhere. So we used our own conception, however limited it was. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, so Bill here is on this page and the next page, even though we're not going to do anything on page 48. What he's doing here is over and over again, he's going to beat a dead horse, and I'm the horse. And he's going to beat us with letting go of old ideas and prejudices. Got to let go of old ideas and prejudices. That's what Bill does on two pages, 47 and 48. But then what it says is he started out, he says, when therefore we speak to you of God, we mean your own conception of God. There's no big book God. Don't have to have my sponsors, God. Don't have to have that home groups, God. My own conception. And what does my own conception need to look like? What? Ask yourself. Consider this. What does it need to look like for me? All powerful, all knowing, always on time, always loving, and always caring and affectionate. You know why he needs to be all those things for me? Because those are the things that I'm not always. He needs to be that for me. That's just my own conception of God. Does need to be yours. Get your own conception of God. It's all good. And this, back to the book, and this applies to another spiritual expression, which we find in this book. Do not let any prejudices, any old ideas you may have against spiritual terms deter you from honestly asking yourself what they mean to you. So if I just let go of my old ideas and let this, and David used a great example of willingness is just the cracking of the door. It's not whipping it open. It's just the cracking of the door. Oh my God, that's really willingness. Bill's going to talk about willingness throughout the whole big book. And then at the start, it says, this was all we needed. This is it. This is a start. This is a jumping off point for us to commence spiritual growth, to affect our first conscious relationship with God as we understood Him. So this is my first conscious, even though it's not an action step, this is my first action of letting go of old ideas so I can have this relationship with God. And then there's a time reference here. After what? After this conscious, after setting aside old ideas and commencing spiritual growth, afterwards we find ourselves accepting many things which never seem entirely out of reach. Couldn't have pulled that one off on my own power. Something's happening here. I don't know what it is, but it's the next sentence says it before the comma. That was growth. That was growth. Please give yourself some credit for opening up cracking the door of willingness here. And then, but if we wish to grow, we had to begin somewhere. So I'm having some eventual faith now. I'm having some eventual faith is creeping into my life. And so we use our own conception of how limited it was. It doesn't matter. Bill's giving us, Bill has scrubbed the big book or this chapter of religious connotations. He just did. He makes it open for all of us. If it was too religious, I couldn't invite me in. I wouldn't have been a part. He's done a wonder. This might be the most spiritual piece of literature anyone's ever written in my experience. Oh my God. And David will tell you, when we started doing this study 5 or 6 years ago, I was scared to death of this chapter. Scared to death of it. It's so involved. What it's really about is letting go of all my ideas so I can have new ones, and relationship of power. Close the book, move on to step 3.
So my own conception of God. We had a friend, and her conception, which I thought was pretty cool, and I shared a lot, was Mother Nature. You talk about a power greater than me, a power greater than all humans. Mother Nature, the entirety of the nature and ecosystem, right, of this planet. I thought that was a wonderful higher power. It's whatever my conception is. That's the beauty of how we approach, right, a power greater than ourselves in 12-step recovery. And it applies to other spiritual expressions in the book. So, what are other spiritual expressions? Like, how about prayer? Again, if I come in filled with prejudices, old ideas, maybe I had religion forced on me as a child, and I reject it. I'm not going to like the word God. I'm not going to like the word prayer. I'm not going to like words like mosque or temple or church or shul or any of these things. I'm going to reject all those nouns, right? That's okay. The idea here is that in order to get better, I just have to start to say, maybe I can let some of this old thinking go away. Right? That's why I say, don't let the prejudice I have against these terms deter me from honestly asking myself what they mean to me, not what they mean to you, what they mean to me. And at the start, this was all we needed to commence spiritual growth. So again, Bill is saying, can I maybe let go of my old ideas about a higher power and a prayer practice and a place of worship, for example, these things that were from my childhood? If I can maybe start to let go of those things, then I'm going to start, same thing, spiritual growth, which is going to create my first conscious, aware relationship with God as I understand Him. And then guess what happens? Once I crack the door's going to widen a little, and I'm going to find myself able to accept many other things which seemed entirely out of reach. What Bill is implying here is I'm going to come up with a prayer life that works for me eventually. I reject prayer maybe coming in, and what happens? I become a daily prayer. That was my experience, guys, right? So we use our own conception, however limited it was, and David already talked about this at some length. How am I supposed to conceive of infinite? How do I drop, okay, do you have a God as infinite power, right? And Dylan says, yes, I do. I say, great, draw me a picture of infinite power. How do you draw infinite, right? It's not possible. It's 21 years in, guys. I know I have God in my life, and my relationship with God is the driving force in my life. I have no idea what God is, what it looks like, where it is. Is it an old white guy with a white beard floating around on a cloud? I don't think so, but I don't think about it. It just doesn't matter, right? I don't need to conceive of something I can't conceive of. All right. And I'll say this too, because David has brought up 2 time references, 2 temporal references today. As soon as and afterward, one of the joys of studying this book over and over and over is you notice new things. And in our last study that we did that lasted 22 months on Wednesdays or Thursday mornings for you guys, it was a blast. We really picked up on all these timing references, and you will too. Now that we brought it up, now you'll notice them all. All right. We better pick up the pace slightly.
Yep.
We needed to ask ourselves but one short question. Everybody ask yourselves, do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe that there's a power greater than myself? As soon as a man can say that he does believe or is willing to believe, that's the key, guys. We emphatically assure him that he's on his way. It has been repeatedly proven among us that upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. So again, guys, I'm just going to, a couple quick comments, and I'll let David share on this. This is another, if I can say maybe I'm going to get better. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe? Which means, am I willing to believe in the future? Maybe. If so, I'm going to be emphatically assured that I'm on my way. On my way to what? To a vital spiritual experience. If I can just say, maybe there's a God of my understanding in which I can have a relationship in the future. Maybe. That's all I got to say. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, so this is the second question now in the second step. Bill asked us the first question on the last in page 45 in the first paragraph. he asks us that question at the very end. It says, but where and how are we going to find this power? That was the first question. We already went over that. The second question here is in the second, in page 47, the second paragraph. And it says, for first out, it says, we needed, so needed is a must. We must ask ourselves but one short question. Do I now believe, time reference again, now, like David pointed out, or am I willing to believe? That's all we're asking here. And then it says that there is a power greater than myself. That is step 2, part 1. That is step 2, part 1, because what's going to happen is insanity is that I believe a lie. Insanity is that I believe a lie. Sanity is to see the truth. Sanity is where I see the truth. And to be honest with you, the 10th step is where I'm going to see the truth. But this is the beginning of relieving me of the insanity in my life, that I can start seeing the truth. And then it gives us the promise here. And this is literal too, by the way, because of that question that there is a power greater than myself, question mark. As soon as a man can say that he does believe or is willing to believe, we emphatically, so emphatically means special force or an impressiveness of an expression, emphatically assure him that he is on his way. On his way to what? A spiritual experience. David pointed this out earlier. This is where the experience starts out, guys. It doesn't, you don't have to wait. You're starting to have some kind of an experience in your life. It has been repeatedly proven among us upon this simple cornerstone. So the cornerstone, we need to know this, because by the time we get to the 5th step, we're going to need to know this stuff, because Bill's going to talk about all this aggregate here. And this is the stone that forms the base or corner of a building. Joining the walls, the cornerstone is the first stone set in the construction of something. So we have a foundation in step 1. We're going to place the cornerstone to help with the structure here. Step 2. And it says, and then it says, a wonderful and effective spiritual structure can be built. This is me building not only a relationship with God, but I'm going to start building a relationship with other human beings now because of this.
Okay, so now we're going to jump ahead a couple of pages here, guys, to page 50. And we're going to look at the bottom paragraph. Starts with here are. I'll give everybody a second to get there. And I know everybody always wants to know, what's the homework? What's the homework? So homework part 1 is we covered a couple of questions that the book asks us, right? And David can recap those questions again once we're at the end. Consider those questions as a part of taking step 2. The other part of the homework is read all the pages in this chapter that we're skipping, right? For efficiency's sake, we can't take it word by word, line by line in 1 hour. So bottom paragraph on 50. Here are thousands of men and women, worldly indeed. And the men and women they're referring to is in the previous paragraphs talking about people who've had vital spiritual experiences, basically. Here are thousands of men and women, worldly indeed. They flatly declare that since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, to take a certain attitude toward that power, and to do certain simple things, there has been a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking. In the face of collapse and despair, in the face of the total failure of their human resources, they found that a new power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction flowed into them. This happened soon. When? Soon after they wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements. Once confused and baffled by the seeming futility of existence, they show the underlying reasons why they were making heavy going of life, leaving aside the drink question. They tell why living was so unsatisfactory. They show how the change came over them. When many hundreds of people are able to say that the consciousness of the presence of God is today the most important fact of their lives, they present a powerful reason why one should have faith. Now, that's a long paragraph, so we're just going to hit a couple of highlights in there, guys, what we think sort of the key statements are. Go ahead, David, jump in and I'll
yeah, as David pointed out, sometimes Bill has very long run on paragraphs, so we can't talk about the whole thing. And another thing that David and I do when we're doing our study is we will bounce around the big book and give you references to everything Bill's talking about here, but we don't have the time to do this in this study. So here are thousands of men. So thousands of men. This in the first edition it said 100. but now we know it's thousands of men have had this experience, worldly indeed, that flatly declare the sense that they come to believe, just asking you to believe. And Joe and Charlie give descriptions of belief and faith. And I'm going to give you my own. And maybe I got it from Joe and Charlie. I'm not even sure. So when I was a kid, and you guys are probably everybody looks a bit much younger than I am. On Saturday morning, there were cartoons, and on TV, they always had cereal commercials. And these cereal commercials, they talk about how this cereal is fruity and crunchy, and it stays great in milk, and it's just amazing. And I thought to myself, wow, I believe them because that's a great commercial. Until I have the experience of actually going to buy that cereal, pouring it in the milk, having my own experience with it, now I have faith that each and every time I buy that box of cereal, that's going to I'm going to have that same result. Prior to that, it was just a belief, right? And that's all we're asking you to have some belief here. And it says, power greater than themselves to take a certain attitude. So toward that power, that I'm going to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. That's the third step thing, and into certain simple things which have been a revolutionary, an internal change. Again, this is an internal problem with an internal solution. It's nothing to do with the color of my skin, my sexual orientation, the way my mom and dad hugged me or didn't hug me or raised me. Nothing. Alcoholism has nothing to do with that. Biologically and genetically, I just have it. Period. The end. But it says, in the face of collapse and despair, in the face of total failure of their human resources, my own power there, that we found that a new, please circle the word new means I've never experienced this before. I'm going to have a new experience. I always, whenever I introduce this to a candidate, a prospect, a sponsee, I say that you're going to have a new experience, something you never had before. That's why it's so important to pay attention to the words here. And what is that power going to give me? It's going to give me peace and happiness. A sense of direction will start flowing in. This happened, and then there's another time reference. Soon after they wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements, work through the steps. Take the steps with someone that is armed with the facts about themselves. On to page 51, fuse and baffle a seemingly futility in existence. They show the underlying reasons. My underlying reasons, we discussed that on page 52. Am I having problems with personal relationships? Am I prey to misery and depression? Am I unhappy? Am I full of fear? Those are the things, those are the unmanageability. That's what my real problem is here. Have I admitted to my innermost self conceded my innermost self that is the problem? I can get free of that. That's what this is telling me. And to go on a little bit farther in the last sentence in the paragraph, which is a long run-on sentence, when many hundreds of people are able to say that the consciousness of the presence of God is today the most important factor of their lives, they present a powerful reason why one should have faith. I can say today that my life is dependent upon a relationship with the power greater than myself. I desperately need a God in my life today. Yeah, I've been sober for a few 24 hours, but it has nothing to do with not drinking anymore. It's not a not drinking program. This is about having relationships with other people, practicing these principles in all my affairs. That's the third part of the 12 step, which is so difficult for an alcoholic like me because I'm selfish and self-centered. There's all kinds of stuff that I could tie that to. We just don't have the time to go into that. Go ahead, David.
So the top of this paragraph is saying that basically, if I come to believe in this power greater than myself and take a certain attitude toward it, which is really me continuing to take the steps, then I'm going to experience a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking. Guys, so much of the study in the book and the references go back to what we covered in page 27 last week, and that I already took us back to one time today. Remember, ideas, emotions, and attitudes, the stuff in my head, my heart, and my gut, that were once the guiding forces of my life that propelled me, how I thought, how I talked, how I behaved. Those get cast aside. I undergo a revolutionary change where I no longer think and feel and react, believe the way that I used to. This is the promise of the 12th step that begins right here in 2. And this is what Bill is trying to demonstrate, that there's been hundreds who became thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, now millions across all our fellowships. Millions of people have had a revolutionary change in their heads, their hearts, and their guts. So, how we all think and react and go through life, right? Why? How? Through my new relationship with God as I understand Him. And then going to the top of 51, once confused and baffled by the seeming futility of existence. Guys, remember on page 52 last week, those bedevilments, and everyone's like nodding their heads, and we all went 8 for 8, right? Full of fear, couldn't make a living, misery and depressed, all that. That's experiencing the futility of existence, which means what's the point of living? So I used to feel that way. Putting aside the drink problem. This is the crux of the spiritual malady. I'm not spiritually ill because of my drinking and my drugging. I'm spiritually ill in addition to my powerlessness over alcohol and other drugs. It's not causal. They snowball, right? Okay, let's move on. We're going to jump ahead to page 53. Ooh, we got another question here. This is in paragraph 2. Short paragraph that says a lot. 53, paragraph 2. Here's another timing reference. You guys are really going to notice them now. When we became alcoholics, crushed
Mm.
by a self-imposed crisis we could not postpone or evade, we had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else he's nothing. God either is or he isn't. What was our choice to be? I just want everyone to take care. I'm going to let David sort of comment first, but I just want to make sure we're all very clear on the language, what Bill's saying here. Let's look at these words. So when we became alcoholics, and this is suggested otherwise in the book, that at some point I lose control of my drinking, and this is my case. I used to drink, yeah, partied, but just like my buddies. Some point, though, I lost control of my drinking, so I became an alcoholic at some point, crushed. You know what it means to be crushed, to be flattened, to be totally beaten by a self-imposed crisis, a crisis that I created, right? And I couldn't postpone or evade it. It means I couldn't push it off. I had to fearlessly, that means without fear, face the proposition, the question, the idea that either God is or he isn't. Right? So now the third question. What's my answer to that question? Go ahead, David.
Yeah. So when we became alcoholics, so we ourselves diagnose ourselves, right? I mean, I've had a couple of guys where I helped diagnose them. Well, I helped every one of them by reading the big book. And I don't do it on my own. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a therapist, not a psychiatrist. But so I realized I'm an alcoholic, as David just described. And then it says, crushed by a self-imposed crisis. I love the definition in the 1938 dictionary of the word crisis. That change in the course of a disease, which indicates whether the result is to be recovery or death.
One more.
This is the decisive method.
Read that back. That's so important.
Okay.
Everybody really listen here to what a definition of crisis.
Yeah, David and I talked about this. Like, we don't think of a crisis like this today. I don't think, right? This is the crisis definition, 1938. This is how purposeful Bill is here. That change in the course of a disease, which indicates the result to be recovery or death. This is a decisive moment. Wow, is that powerful? Wow, is that guy brilliant? Holy smokes. And it says, because then he backs it up by after the word crisis says, we can't postpone or evade this. We had to fearlessly face the proposition that God is either everything or is he nothing. And then it's God either is or he isn't. Again, this is not external. This has nothing to do with this self-imposed crisis that they talked about there. Not my job, not my wife, not my kids, not mom and dad. Nothing to do with that. Self-imposed. I get to own this. That is freeing. Trust me. Believe me. And then the decision I have to make is God everything or is God nothing? Either God is or it isn't. And then I get to consider, and David and I are really big on this. Just consider this. Just consider, don't answer. You know, like when you were in class, 4th grade, teacher asks you a question, you answer the question, then we go on to the next one, the next one, the next one. I don't retain any of this stuff because I'm a terrible listener. Here we're asking you to stop, pause, consider what the book is asking us. What is your choice to be? Is God everything or is he nothing? God either is or he isn't. Ask yourself that question. That's all the book is asking.
All right, big finish here. We're going to move to page 55. We got 2 paragraphs, and I'm going to read them both, and then we'll talk at these 2. So we're going to read paragraph 2, and then we're going to read paragraph 4 on page 55. Remember the question we asked? It was the first question of the day we asked back on 45. Where and how were we to find this power that we were lacking? We promised you Bill was going to tell us where to find the power. Actually, we were fooling ourselves. For deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. So deep down inside of me, guys, that's where. It may be obscured by calamity. This is like chaos. By pomp. It's like me showing off, right? Trying to be cool. Or by worship of other things, money, sex, prestige, right? But in some form or other, it is there. For faith in a power greater than ourselves and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives are facts as old as man himself. Skip the next paragraph. We're going to read the fourth paragraph. We can only clear the ground a bit. This is like what David and I are doing, leading us through this together here. We can only clear the ground a bit. If our testimony helps sweep aside prejudice, old ways of thinking, enables you to think honestly, that means no lying and telling the whole truth, encourage you to search diligently within yourself, remember, deep down inside, then if you wish, you can join us on the Broad Highway. It's a motorway in the United Kingdom. With this attitude, right, which is sweep and not sitting in prejudice, thinking honestly and searching diligently, with that attitude, you can't fail. I can't fail. The consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you.
So here, actually, we were fooling ourselves, and David said this is answering questions for us. So every man, woman, and child, every one of us had this fundamental idea of God. God isn't lost, never been lost. This is about the seeking. It's always about the seeking for me. It may be obscured by calamity, and I put calamity in the definitions of the state of great distress or misery, but also an event causing great and often sudden damage or distress, a disaster. And then, so on top of that, then pomp is boastfulness or vanity, right? Ego. It's my ego. That's what's blocking me, right? By worship of other things. Am I worshiping what is competing for my sobriety today? That's the question. Is it my overtime? Is it that extra paycheck? Is that relationship, that girl, that guy that I want to be with? Is it my kids? What is competing for my sobriety, my recovery today? I need to ask myself that. Am I putting God first, my sobriety second? I have to ask myself those things. But in some form or other, it is there for faith in a power greater than ourselves and the miraculous demonstration. I'm going to get results with this miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives are facts as old as man. Trust in this process and faith is action. How can I deny this stuff? I'm experiencing it over and over again. And then the bottom paragraph that David read real briefly here, because we're running out of time. We can only clear the ground a bit. Our testimony, what we need to do here is if our testimony sweeps away prejudice, enables us to think honestly, encourage you to search diligently. Those are conditions that I need to meet within yourself. Then if you wish, you can join us in the Broad Highway. So Broad Highway is where others are living. And then it says, with this attitude, you cannot fail. Haven't we been trying to get a new attitude for a long time? Attitude in the back of the book on page 570 in the appendix 2, it says attitude of intolerance or religion denial is the only thing that can defeat me. That's the only thing that can defeat me. It's in the spiritual appendix in the back of the book. My attitude of intolerance or religion denial. That's what can defeat me here. And then the conscience of your belief is sure to come to you. It just comes to me. It's the same way as page 27 David read to us last week. Same thing. I don't have the power to bring this upon me. And this is the result of me being honest and thorough.
So where did we start this week when we bring it full circle? We started at the top of 44, where we made sure that we understood and identified with step one, right? Brought back up the the physical and mental powerlessness and the need for a spiritual solution. We went right from that to 45, talking about lack of power and that we needed, if I need power, where and how were we to find this power? We told you Bill was going to answer the question. The how is what we spent most of today talking about. And really what it comes down to is the how is if I can say, maybe there's a power greater than me, and maybe I can have a relationship with that power one day, and maybe I can let go of some old thinking, Then I can seek God where? He's already with me. He's deep down inside of me. That's the how and the why, by saying maybe and looking inside of me to get better instead of outside of me. Thanks for taking step 2 of this, guys. I'm going to kill the recording and then we'll stick around for a few minutes if anybody has any questions.